We were 5 years in. We were starting to calmly talk about divorce at the dinner table. That's when you know it's serious, like you're calmly talking about it.
Hi, and welcome to the Storia Podcast, where storytellers disrupt. I'm David Noronha.
And I'm Fabiano Altamora.
And before we dive in with our very special guest, please remember to like, subscribe, follow, and give us that 5-star review. Brother, who do we have in the hot seat?
We have the
today?
amazing Katherine Warnock.
Yes,
She's the VP of Original Content at The Chosen. She's a mother, a wife, a boss, has got a resume as long as the Magna Carta. And I just, she is a phenomenal communicator. I had the absolute honor of interviewing you. You did one of our sessions at the Creative Summit back in May, and I think you had just inspired so many people. You're a woman in Hollywood, and I just think you redefined so much of what it is to be a mom, a wife in Hollywood right now on one of the hottest TV shows in the world. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you literally had a window to fit us in. I was like, yes, I can do it. I was like, brilliant. Well, let's book her in person and do it right now.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Oh, guys, it's so much fun to be here.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So we're
going to do a two-parter.
We are going to do a
with
two-parter.
Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to focus.
Me.
Yes, you are. We don't do that for a lot of people, but we're going to focus one episode on you being a woman of faith in Hollywood, and then another episode focused on this killer TV show that you're doing, The Chosen. So to kick it off, how is it being a woman of faith in Hollywood today?
Really fun and extremely difficult.
Wow. Okay, so the fun part sounds fun, but I'm super curious about the difficult. What is difficult about being a woman of faith in Hollywood right now?
I mean, it's difficult in general. I think no matter what gender you are, so that's really important to clarify. I think, especially as Christians, we want to disrupt. We want a renaissance. We want the revolution. And very few of us, I think, ever know until you're in it how difficult and borderline excruciating at times that can be. And I don't say that from a place of complaint.
Sure.
I say that like God made one of the fruits of the Spirit, perseverance, for a reason. And I think we kind of just want to dismiss that one. But being a woman, so that's either any gender, any age. Being a woman, I've got my babies.
Yeah.
I'm uniquely designed to yearn to be with my children. And so it's this constant wrestle of where I check in frequently with the Lord and I go, is this still is this still the plow you want my hand to? My husband and I do the check-in because it means a lot more is on him, especially when I travel. So that's hard.
How old are your kids?
So I have 5-year-old twins and a 3-year-old.
Wow.
So those are very special ages. Those are ages where they're they need their mom and their dad, but they need their mom. They have a special relationship with your mom. How does that pull on your heart?
Oh, it's like, especially when his grace is poured out lavishly and extravagantly, which is usually dependent upon my heart posture, to be frank, then it's okay. But the trips that I have to take, where like I just went to Tuscany to film with Andrea Bocelli. Like I should be on cloud 9. It's Andrea Bocelli. Of course. And I'm like sobbing on the airplane. Like, every minute on the airplane is taking me more miles away from my babies. And so you just cry out for more. God, you need your grace. I need your mercy if this is still the path you have me on.
Yeah.
But I'm very boundaried. I carve out huge amounts of time with my kids. We make it work.
It's funny because, my son told me 3 days ago that he was moving out and my daughter's already moved out. And it's this thing that life just comes at you and you don't realize it's going to hit you when you get to my age and you're like empty nesters. And the thing that's been going through my mind is, have I taught them all that I need to know before they move out? It's so funny because it seems to like just jump up on you. So like, how do you balance that? Because I think a lot of Christians get this prophetic word that they are going to be starry-eyed and move to LA and do all these things. And, especially with marriages and kids in Hollywood, a lot of the time they don't work out. So how do you navigate being in a healthy relationship with your husband, going after the call that God has put on your life? How do you balance that out, or is there no balance?
Community, accountability, the kind of accountability that will kick you up the bum and force you to listen. Accountability, who you trust in their ability to hear the Lord's voice above your own. Because like my marriage, like Daniel and I, we were both flourishing in Hollywood, had flourishing Hollywood careers. He was a first AD in films. And I was creative director of a film studio at the time. Our marriage was completely falling apart. Wow. We were 5 years in. We were starting to calmly talk about divorce at the dinner table. That's when you know it's serious, like you're calmly talking about it. We then had friends move in with us for a season, Dave and B. Ward, who are actually key leaders at Bethel. And
that was a God setup.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And so they, God just used them to mightily just be community to us. Dave still says to this day, it is the greatest miracle he's ever seen, the absolute resurrection of our marriage.
Wow.
Yeah.
God.
Can I ask a follow-up? And it's okay. Like, I mean, only go to the place that you want to go. Were there key issues, and I'm talking about the issues that are pertain to two people in the industry. I'm not talking about the personal stuff. Were there key issues tied to the industry that were straining your marriage?
Yes, some are private, and I won't share if that's okay. But others are if you have any undealt with shame in particular, which kind of the fruit of it is your self-image issues, self-worth issues, so on and so forth. Like there's so many, like for me, it the fruit of it, the negative fruit of it was control, manipulation, all unintentional, but I needed to be perfect. Like if I'm not perfect, I'm not acceptable. And so that drove into our marriage. And that was not only how I operated in the business, but it's also how I operated in my marriage and Daniel to different degrees. And so I went through a very long season of about 2.5 years of just working with the Lord to uproot shame from my life. And this is like before Brene Brown, and it was like cool to work on.
Yeah, there were no bumper stickers talking about shame yet. Yeah.
I wish there were. I only had like The Shack. Yeah. Like the author of The Shack was the only one talking about it at the time. And so God was mighty on my behalf and like showed me the way through that. And now I know unequivocally that I can sit at big global tables and I have no self involved because God's uprooted any need of self to be at that table. And so I can go toe to toe with a giant in the industry because I'm like, I don't have fear, man. I don't need you to like me. I don't need you to think I'm perfect. Like all that's dead. Thank you, Jesus. Whereas I look and so often I'm like, oh my gosh, if I still had shame in my life, I would be crippled right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because, you know, it's the kind of bumper sticker in Hollywood that marriages typically don't last, right? What was you were having these conversations at the table. Did you feel you were going to become one of those statistics of marriages in Hollywood that weren't going to last? Like what was a key turning point? Was it the community, or was there like as Bunyan puts it, like a slough of despond that you went to, there was a key moment that was a turning point for you?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think it's good to kind of caveat that Daniel and I, like, we don't look at ourselves as, because he has a vast history in the industry as well, but we never look at ourselves through the lens of industry first. And so we look at ourselves as we are sons, we are slaves. That's what we're called to be. And so we looked at, okay, are we going to be one of those Christian statistics? It never was an industry statistic. That makes it even more sad because you're like, you're one of the rare Christians really living for Jesus in Hollywood. And is this going to happen? That's just heart-wrenching. So yeah, I think and God promised me in that whole saga, he said, Katherine, if you will focus on uprooting, like allowing me to uproot shame in your life and put your marriage on the back burner, which was petrifying to me because that meant failure, right? Someone that needed to be perfect, that's failure. He said, trust me with your marriage. I need you to focus here. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And he said, if you do that, I will turn your marriage around in a day. In a day. Wow. And I thought, okay, a day. That's like 1,000 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I thought it was a metaphorical day.
It was.
He was literal.
Wow.
He was God in one day. It was a bold, dramatic miracle that just completely, it was a resurrection. It wasn't like, God, you slowly healed our marriage. It was a Lazarus had been stinking and decaying in the grave. And God, you just in a day, 1 24-hour period, resurrected it. Completely holy, never to be the same again.
Oh my goodness.
You know, the Lord shared this idea, this gift with me a while ago, and I forget the context now, but it's this belief now based on testimonies of him walking me through some dark days that we're only just one prayer, one conversation away. A prayer to him and a conversation with that loved one, that thing. And I think many of us believe that it might take, and sometimes it is a process. Sometimes it is in a moment, and that's beautiful and that's sacred as well. But I've come to believe that I think most things would just break down and hope would rise. Just one prayer, one conversation. Katherine, we touched on you as a mother in Hollywood and the price and the cost that you pay. I'm curious, do you feel as a woman that there's a unique sacrifice that mothers and women have to make that's distinct from men who choose, who are married and have kids, who choose a career in the industry?
I personally think so. I know not everyone would agree with me. I very much believe God hardwired in men and women very different, unique creative design and yearnings and abilities. And we need each other deeply collaboratively. And so it's a constant. I'm not one that needs to be a working professional. Like that's not my jam. And so for God to completely reverse the gender norms in our marriage has been, especially when we started doing this 20 years ago, 18 years ago. And so for my husband, it's just like, that's before it really became the Christian thing, like okay in Christianity circles. Right. And so it's definitely a journey for us. Like, what does this look like? How do you do this well? There are people like Haley Braun and others that I'm like, hey, there are few of us women doing this and like traveling the world and having to really press into accountability and character development. Like, let's run together. How do we do this?
Yeah, because you need the examples of others. It's funny because I know Haley. We both know Haley, and I spent a lot of time with Ryan because he was my editor on 2 films. I consider him a really, really close friend, and I've been able to observe in Ryan, by example, a man who has chosen to be both provider and caretaker in such a unique and humble and beautiful way. That it's actually been helpful to me in the season. My wife is directing, small example of what we're discussing, one of our theatrical productions. And 3 months ago, we sat down and we had a very intentional conversation. We actually had to plan for it. We had to plan for my ego and my schedule, adjustments that I knew I would have to internally make, that it sounds like Daniel has made and that Ryan and other men have made, where it's like you have to go, okay. And it's been a beautiful realization for me. It's actually been a gift, I will tell you. It's been a gift to me in this way, in that it's been a gift to serve my wife and to give her time to play and to support her in a way that I know she's done for me for decades, because I've traveled and I've done this and I've done that. It's also given me an appreciation for the immense weight and responsibility that my wife has carried. And it's actually drawn me closer to my children. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I don't think we've been closer. And if you had asked me like, hey, your wife's going to go off and she's going to do this really important thing and your schedule is going to change and you're going to get up earlier and go to bed earlier, but fill in the blank, it's going to give you these gifts. I don't think I ever would have seen it. And I think that's the grace of God, that even when we reverse and we change and we improvise and we do these things, if our heart is pointed at his way, there's always a gift in it.
Yeah.
Have you guys discovered any unique gifts by doing life in this very different way?
We always joke that my husband and I are both alphas. So he's a unique guy to be staying at home. Yeah, he's great fun. And he's my biggest champion, my biggest cheerleader. I think we've got really tough kids but also deeply emotionally in tune children who feel the freedom to be messy. And that's so much of my husband. I think if I were home if I were home with them, I think it would be a little too much mercy, and I think kids more than ever in this generation need that, the really firm hand that is like, these are the boundaries. Inside the boundaries, go to town.
Yeah.
Whereas, and it allows me, he calls me, you get to come in and be Father Christmas. Works for me.
Yeah, I love the irony because he's also a screenwriter. So I can hear the irony in his little character for you.
Yeah. I mean, and you, like, for people watching, I mean, your career didn't start out in Hollywood at all, didn't it? Didn't you start out in education?
I was a high school teacher.
You were a high school teacher?
Did you not know that?
I did not know that.
How do you go from that? Because a lot of people would do the traditional route of going to, I don't know, UCLA, USC, studying acting or studying screenwriting or production or whatever, producing. So how did you come from being a high school teacher to being at this top level in the entertainment industry right now? Just walk us through that. I mean,
I have such a giggle because I'm next to pedigrees, like, trained in the arts at Harvard, and, kings of Hollywood are like are my peers. And I'm like, I was a high school teacher. I taught history and speech.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Wild.
God. So the quick version is I became a Christian when I was 20 years old, Division I track and field athlete. And I immediately just was like, this Bible is alive, living, fully available today. But I only ever wanted to be a teacher my whole life. So I just carried on that path, but just radically pursued God. Like Matthew 11:12, I was storming heaven going, I'm like robbing the joint. Mm-hmm. Like what? Like I'm taking any destinies in here that have been aborted. I'm here for them. I'll take them. Yeah. Like that was me. I literally was the bully of heaven. And so I skip ahead to, I go to a conference in Canada, Toronto Airport Christian Church. Renewal was happening there quite extravagantly. I had never been in an environment like that before. Mm-hmm. I then had a profound encounter with God there, came back and was never the same. Like was just simply never the same again. I went from wanting white picket fence, have 2.5 kids, the 0.5 being a dog, marry a pastor, never leave the country, to send me to the nations. So I come across these little known people named Heidi Baker, Roland Baker. Mm-hmm. This is before the internet was like the internet. Like, so you still had to send away for cassette tapes.
Yeah.
So I did a cassette tape just to find out who are these people. Next thing I know, I'm in Mozambique, Africa, doing the first ever Holy Given School. That's where I meet Daniel. I then have another profound encounter with the Lord where he just went, I now want you to go to Hollywood. And I was like, my only grid for Hollywood was being an actor. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything else, like all the plethora of jobs and money that go into Hollywood. So thus started the journey. And it's been I call it a bipolar journey ever since, but God.
So you didn't necessarily have that desire to go to Hollywood. It was kind of out of left field.
No, he asked me to go. I remember going back to my bunk in Mozambique, Africa, wrestling with him for like 7 to 10 hours. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at my journals. Literally wrestling. Because he was showing me, if you go, this is everything that will happen. It was all like the bad stuff. And I was like, I will not go. Like, this is like, because Hollywood, I have so much hope for Hollywood. I don't look at it as this doomsday dark place, but it's dark. It's hard. It's really a difficult industry. And I was like, I will not go. And then he goes, but if you do go, this is like the last hour. If you do go, and he begins showing me the kingdom fruit, and his legacy being lived out. And I was like, oh, I'll go. I'll do anything you want me to do. Mm-hmm. So then he said, now he takes you as far away from the call as possible. And so then began about a decade of just maybe about 12 or 13 years of yo-yoing back and forth between industry work, working in fashion, working in the church, you name it, I've done it, waitressing. Like, it was the most humbling, humiliating, hard, amazing, over decade.
Wow. But Daniel was already in the industry at this point.
No, so then this is, okay. Do you know Daniel and I are like an arranged marriage?
No.
No. Okay. You have to unpack that for us. This is so unconventional. This is
like a J.J. Abrams.
Oh my goodness me!
Sorry, guys.
So unconventional. I love that. Though.
You're asking me questions that need unpacking. So in
Wow.
Africa, so I had been on a long journey with the Lord where I said, I don't want to get married unless I'm going to be more productive for your kingdom. Because like I get saved at 20.
You already, by the way, sound like a producer with that one.
God, I'm telling you what I will and will not do. Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you will be more productive if you get married. And I go, fine. I said, well, I don't want to do this like date around thing. Just the moment I meet him, can you tell me it's him? And I'll get on with it. And I just I didn't have language for an arranged marriage, but I knew that it wasn't going to be unconventional.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, can you just promise me it will be a marriage of love and not just this, I'm married to like someone I hate. He said, yes. We shook on it, deal. Skip ahead to Mozambique, Africa. So this Hollywood call hasn't happened yet. I'm carrying buckets of water to build a latrine because you make your own.
Of course you do.
You make your own latrines.
Yeah.
And I see this man playing football, American soccer, with some of the local village boys. And I was a borderline professional athlete. I was a sprinter. White people are not typically sprinters. So my whole community was Black. So I'd only really ever dated Black men. So I see this super tall, hairy white man with no booty. And this is important information. And the Lord goes, that's your husband.
My goodness.
And literally my first thought was, he has no booty. That was literally my first thought. I mean, what? Okay, king of the universe, you failed. No, and the second thought was he has terrible running form, which he actually doesn't. But from where I come from, he did. And then my third thought was, have fun making that happen, God, because it's like, that's like, I'm not going to manipulate this. I'm not going to flirt. I'm not going to do all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And so then skip ahead, I get the call. The Lord very clearly calls me to Hollywood out of like complete surprise. And I remember saying to the Lord, if this really is you, that I heard you right, that I'm supposed to marry Daniel, then he will have a similar call. And it was like not even days later that he kind of gets a very dramatic word about being called to Hollywood as well.
Oh my goodness. So where did he train then? Did he train or is it
Daniel is a fantastic actor in his own right. And he was put forward to all the top acting schools in London. He was born and raised in London.
Yeah.
He didn't go that path. I think he just knew he would just tank his life if he just wasn't ready. The character wasn't ready. So then at that point he was a youth pastor. Am I mixing up my years? I am mixing up my years. No,
HTB?
he was a drug addict. So God could...
So wait a second. So God arranged a
not an addict. I think one would maybe say a functional addict.
Oh wow!
So God completely wasn't even like a practicing Christian. God completely parachuted into his life, captivated him, and he said, "Okay, Lord, I want to live for you. You have to get me out of London." And it was like not even a day later, his best mate calls from Mozambique, Africa, and was like, "Hey, you want to come to Africa?"
And he wasn't even saved yet.
No, at that point he was like brand new.
God had shown up,
and he said, "If you want me to live outside this lifestyle of drugs, partying," he's like, "You've got to get me out of London."
Catherine, as you tell your story, the thing that strikes me is that it's a series of unexpected God curveballs.
Mm-hmm.
But as we begin to wrap up this first episode with you, I have a question. God called you to Hollywood. Why you? Why did he choose you to go?
If he lets you know, tell me, David.
What do you carry? What do you think you carry? You said you've said multiple times that you've sat at tables with kings and queens, and we know that feeling to be sitting at the table with what I would call suits. Why do you think he gave you a seat at that table? What do you carry uniquely?
It sounds overly simplistic. I love him with every fiber of my being. He has permission to do anything he wants, anytime he wants. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's actually extraordinarily rare for someone to actually live it. And you heard snippets of my story, and I think that's a woman that will light a match and tank her whole life on the word of the Lord. Like positively alter my life, I should say, not tank my life. But also, I don't want to be there.
Hollywood is obsessed with the things it can't actually possess. I'm sure you've experienced this.
Yes.
And as I see you seated around this table with kings and queens, some of them, I'm sure, there's also a bunch of orphans. And there's nothing like having a son or a daughter who's willing to serve the king to be given a seat at that table. It has this unique, it unlocks things. I've seen this in my own humble way, where if you're willing to say hello to this person, if you're willing to actually do weird things as an actor on set, like actually bring somebody else something to eat, it's the stupidest sounding thing. But it literally, I've seen people's walls crumble under the simplest acts of kindness and service. Is there one that stands out to you? One testimony from sitting at tables that you can share, you can leave out names, where you've seen God do something just so unexpected because of your willingness to serve?
I mean, there's so many. I think my favorite to tell is I was a creative director in fashion, and fashion is, if you can believe it, more toxic than film.
Oh my goodness.
And models would come in high, hungover, not having slept from the night before of whatever activities they were doing. And you're too busy to talk about Jesus. You're too busy to even establish relationship. It's just the reality. And so the only thing you have is to trust in God's ability to utterly captivate an environment. And so I just spent my entire inside world with him, just going, Isaiah 54:2, Jesus, how do I push you out? How do I extend these tent pegs so that others can come under and rest? This studio I have authority over this studio, this portion of this global company. And it wasn't long before models started coming in. I've stopped sleeping around. I don't know why. I've stopped taking drugs. I don't know why. And I'm just sitting there kind of, because that was all new to me at the time of just, now I take this tent and I put it over huge multi-million-dollar projects. I put it over people. Now I feel like it's like a weapon I harness. But at the time I was like just marveling, like God was teaching me the power of Isaiah 54:2. And I've started going to church. I don't know why. And it wasn't long before a model told a friend of mine that the whole reason she became a Christian was because of me.
Wow.
And she said, anytime I would come into the studio, my anxiety would leave, the depression would leave. I would feel hope. I would feel peace. And the moment I would walk out, it would all come back. She goes, so I began noticing this. And this individual is now a global figure, she and her husband, and very passionate Christians, but in the mainstream space. And she said, so a friend of hers, she went to check out New Age. She kept hunting for, what is this that I'm feeling? And then a friend invited her to church, takes the body, right? Yeah. Invites her to church. She walks into church and she feels the Holy Spirit. And she's like, this is it. So she becomes a full-blown on fire Christian. And many others became Christians. And so that was the first time where I understood the power of what a laid down lover can do in any environment, whether it's Hollywood, politics, the grocery store, anywhere. Isaiah 54:2 is the biggest like hidden secret that we have.
What are the workings like for you? Because, we talk about being laid down lovers, and, you say you don't necessarily want to be in Hollywood. You're obviously very good at it. You know, the Lord has called you there. So I'm sure you revel in what the Lord is doing right now. But what does it look like for you being a lay down lover? Because obviously you're very influential, but most people would dream for that level of influence. Most people would actually say, I would do anything to be in Katherine's position and have that influence and be able to tell the stories that you want to tell. It doesn't happen for a lot of people. So what does that being a laid down lover and not wanting to be there look like whilst you are there?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's a great question. So many different things. The thing that comes to mind readily is the character development never stops. He transforming us from glory to glory. Actually, I beg and plead that it actually increases. The demand on me to go from glory to glory increases. Because when you're in this type of position, and I'm very thankful for this position. Let me be very clear.
Of course.
But when you're in this type of position, it's very easy to you're getting the self accolades. You're getting the sense of achievement. You're having all these things. And so it's constantly keeping my identity where it's supposed to be focused and being nourished off of the right things. And it's an active practice. And so that's the biggest thing of just how it's constantly going, okay, I might not have the same amount of hours to pour and press into you and praise you and just be you and sit with you, Jesus. So I have to learn to abide on the go with you a lot of times. So it's been something for many years that I've had to like really develop into a craft and an art form. And I know this sounds ironic, but it feels far richer than in the seasons where I had hours to just lay at his feet undisturbed. They both had such intrinsic value. But this season at this level in the natural, to be able to press into just his abiding presence while in the middle of just half the time chaos. That's a richness I didn't know could exist.
It challenges me, man. I'm not going to lie to you. It challenges it. Let's get vulnerable on a podcast. Yeah, I think it challenges me because you know when you have those desires, because like, you know, God called you out of left field to Hollywood. I think it's always been there in my heart to want to, I don't know, just to influence. I don't even know if I can fully unpack this, but it's always been that massive heart.
I'm encouraged. I think the counterintuitiveness of that it's positional, that it's devotional, and that it's also a calling. And each of us will be called uniquely. I mean, what I see over Katherine is just, we've all been called to creativity in such supremely different ways. And there's such irony and beauty and submission.
What would you say then to people that feel called to it? What advice would you give to people that are wanting to go into it? Because I know you said it's hard, but it's beautiful. Like it is. I mean, we say to our students all the time, like, you know, for me, acting is one of the most privileged jobs in the world because you just get to embody flawed characters and you see redemption. Sometimes you don't. It's a cautionary tale. And we get to show a side of humanity and actually experience somewhat a side of humanity that not everybody gets to see. And I think that's a privilege. That's a real privilege. But what advice would you give to somebody who all they want to do is really just go into Hollywood and if they can affect some level of change or do it just because they enjoy doing it? You know, we have to have that side as well. You know, somebody might say, it's not just a calling. I just really love what I do. Yeah. You know, would you have any advice, like pearls of wisdom practically?
I mean, one of the biggest mantras I live by is do not despise small beginnings. I think so often we're so focused on the end goal, which more often than not is our goal, not God's goal, that we're missing all the small beginnings. We're missing the richness. We're missing the journey because he actually doesn't care where he's trying to. He doesn't care that I'm in this position on the biggest TV show in the world. He doesn't care. He cares that I'm devoted to him in the midst of this really phenomenal job position. This isn't ever where I wanted to be. And so it's an active discipline to be like, it's not about the end goal. It is about my living day to day in relationship with Jesus. And the third thing would be Ecclesiastes. It says, just simply do what your hands find to do. And I think we get so caught up in the call. Let me tell you, if you go on my LinkedIn, you'll look at it and be so confused because it doesn't look at all like the path one should take to become this executive on a global show. But I'll tell you what, I was simply just doing what my hands found to do. Whatever God led me to do to pay my bills and to be obedient to him, even though 90% of it did not look like the call in my life. And I did it with a cheerful heart. It was hard, but I did it with a cheerful heart because I knew he was in it. I'm like, obviously, God, you've asked me to do this because it's shaping something in me. And we need to invest almost our entire attention. I would say, invest it in your craft, but invest it in your character. 90% of your investment should go into your character, 10% into your craft, even if that.
Katherine, you're a superstar. We can't wait to dive into the biggest global phenomenon with you in the follow-up episode with Katherine Warnock. Katherine, thanks for hanging with us for this first episode.
So much.
And thanks for listening to the Storia Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.